Zombies are one of the most boring monsters in Dungeons and Dragons. There, I said it. You know exactly what a D&D zombie does. It shuffles at you, hits for not much. It has a mildly annoying feature where it can shrug off one killing blow, and then it's a corpse that nobody thinks about ever again. Which is absolutely insane to me, because zombies are the entire foundation of one of the best horror franchises ever made. Resident Evil has been squeezing genuine dread out of Guy but slower for almost 30 years, and it does it by never treating the zombie like the finished product. The zombie is a starting point, it's the chassis you build variations onto. A regular zombie, a crawler, a dog, a crimson head, a licker, a regenerator. That's like 4 or 5 root ideas based off of the same creature. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Not how do I put Umbrella Corporation in my campaign. What does Resident Evil do that means that they can use 1 or 2 creatures over and over again with different variations and still keep you coming back for more? So get yourself a beverage and let's get into it. One of the first things that I want to say is that the zombies aren't really what makes the game scary and you scream like a little girl. They're just a part of it. The things that do that is the absolute vulnerability. You're always one mistake away from death. Knowing that the items you need to survive are scarce. There isn't an infinite amount of them. And one of the most important things for me that I realized is that the map itself is the antagonist. Playing through these games, you come to realize that if the maps weren't built the way they were, then it wouldn't work at all. You would just mow down all the zombies, or you'd be able to just strafe around them and they wouldn't actually matter. And the last thing is that the game itself is designing your anxiety on purpose. And there's probably people out there thinking D&D is almost engineered to be the opposite of those 4. At level 5, your party's basically superhero adjacent. You can just conjure food from nothing and fully heal on a long rest. This isn't a design flaw, by the way, it's just built for a different genre. Our job is to go in and surgically remove the safety nets one at a time and replace them with tension. First up is lore, because if I'm being honest, half the fun of Resident Evil lore is that it's completely unhinged bio-horror soap opera dressed up as science. So let's fantasyify it. In the games, the whole virus apocalypse traces back to a flower found in West Africa called the Stairway of the Sun. In your campaign, that's your Underdark bloom, some ancient abyssal flower growing where sunlight has never touched. And centuries ago, a cabal of alchemists, your Umbrella, found it and realized its pollen rewrites the bodies of anything that breathes it in. Massive strength, 0 impulse control. So guess what? We have zombies with a reason to exist instead of just a wizard did it. And if you've played Resident Evil Village, you know Mother Miranda found an ancient fungal superorganism called the Megamycete living under a village and used it to basically resurrect her dead daughter by turning random villagers into werewolves and mutant lords. That is, and I cannot stress enough, an incredible D&D hook already. A grieving, fanatical druid cult worshipping a sentient fungal hive mind, implanting spores into followers and watching them warp into horrifying flesh monsters. You don't even have to change much. And here's a fun one, the Elpis twist. In the newest game Requiem, the big MacGuffin everybody's fighting over is something called Elpis, which every faction assumes is the ultimate mind control bioweapon. If you haven't played it and want to, then just skip the next couple of seconds. The twist at the end is that it's actually a cure, a vaccine that ends the outbreak. Again, what a genuinely great narrative structure you can steal outright. Have your players spend the whole campaign hunting down what they think is an apocalypse in a bottle, built by the mad alchemists, guarded by everyone who wants to weaponize it, and it turns out to be the literal salvation of the setting. The through line here is that we're not copying the plot points, we're just copying the shape of the horror, the ancient biological corruption, a cult or faction that's exploiting it, and a MacGuffin that recontextualizes everything, you know? Next up, we're going to talk about taking away your players' safety blankets. Something I had to talk myself out of early on while making this script and thinking about these ideas is that I didn't want to have to add a bunch of homebrew stuff and new subsystems to make resources feel tight and to make this work. And in reality, you don't have to do any of that. You just need to stop handing out stuff willy-nilly. Nobody's forcing you to put a bag of holding in your loot table, or to have good berries in the first place. If it's not in a shop and no NPC teaches it, and if the party never finds a scroll of it, it simply isn't a factor, and you don't have to rewrite a spell to get there. And you can just add a little twist to items too, like the good berries. Say you get bitten by one of these infected and it gives you some sort of infection or condition, maybe the good berries can help with that. And even if a spell like that does come up in your party's hands, you've already got a lever for it built into the rules, material compatibility components. I know a lot of us wave them away, but if you want to keep things scarce, you can start tracking pouches of bat guano, you know? Just by doing this alone, it will add that feeling of tension and scarcity because your players are used to having everything. They're not used to you saying you've only got a certain amount of X, Y, and Z. And it's the same logic that applies to the inventory. You don't need a bulk system or slot calculator to recreate that item box anxiety. You just need to keep track of the weight you can carry. And then the GM might say, you can carry this or you can carry that. Pick one and let the players sit with it. Find a heavy stone crest that opens the final door. Just tell them plainly it's awkward and heavy enough that something's got to give. A healing potion stays behind or the crest does. And honestly, I think just actually using the mechanics and following the components and being a bit more scarce with what you're giving them will just be enough. You don't even have to mess with the inventory. If you want one small system on top of all that curation, this is the one I'd probably bother with because it solves a real problem. Counting ammo is tedious and nobody enjoys it. Usage dice fix that. Your quiver of arrows or your lantern oil is just a single die, say a D8. Every time it gets used meaningfully, roll it. Low roll, it steps down. D8 becomes a D6, D6 becomes a D4, and a bad roll on the D4 means you're out. Completely out of whatever that item is. The thing to remember when we're running this type of campaign is that this world isn't normal. I mean, there's probably parts of it that aren't affected, at least to some degree, but there's parts where your players are going to enter where things will be scarce, and things like long rests or Resident Evil safety rooms, for instance, can only happen in certain areas. Think about the Age of Umbra, the Halcyon domain, the Daggerheart campaign setting. If you want to rest, you have to meet certain conditions. It can be the same this way. You need to find a specific area and often have to earn it. And even then, you could add in stuff if your players are finding it too easy, like you got infected and you have the infected condition. That means that you can only heal half your max health when you have a long rest. An idea I liked was that you could find some sort of sanctuary sigil, like a stick of rare incense, whatever fits your setting really. You need one to safely ward the room for the night. They could be handed out to you before you go into these areas that are infected, or if you're lucky, you might find them along the way. If you rest too often, you're burning through a resource you'll need later, and if you push forward without resting, you risk your party's lives. Okay, now here's the part of the video I could probably talk about for 2 hours, because this is the single most underrated thing Resident Evil does, and almost no D&D dungeon does it. The map is not like a hallway, it's a puzzle box that loops back on itself. The classic RE structure, you walk into the mansion, and within 10 minutes you see the big locked door. It's obviously the way out, or the way to the boss or whatever, and you need 3 or 4 keys, crests, medallions, whatever your flavor is. Those keys are scattered throughout the distinct wings of the map, each behind their own mini puzzle. And with that in mind, this is how I'd build my dungeons. I'd have a central hub with a big visible blockade. Players see the goal early, which matters because it gives them a mental map immediately instead of endless wandering. And when I actually play tested this with my players, what I did was I'd laminated a floor plan map, and then I let them use like a pen and write over top of it with notes like exit or needs 4 keys, and then write down which keys they were so they all had it in the middle of the room. You need sub blockades that require environmental manipulation. A classic example of this is the east wing's flooded with toxic water. You can't swim it, you have to find the boiler room, locate a missing gear, get the power back on and drain the flood. Suddenly your fighter with 20 strength is useless here, and Jabard, who took the Tinker's tool, is the hero of the hour. I do love me a spotlight swap. Loops is the actual secret source. When your players fight their way down a brutal corridor to grab a key, do not make them walk back through the same empty hallway. Give them a shortcut, a crate they can kick open from the inside, a ladder that drops down, then spits them back into the hub. It feels like a reward, like they've actually made progress that's now permanent, and functionally it means backtracking never feels like punishment. Using fixed encounters instead of random tables actually surprised my players. No random monster rolls, every threat has a location and it stays there. Why, you ask? Because it means the players who pay attention and remember the map can start optimizing their route, sneaking past a licker they know is asleep in the east corridor, using a loop to bypass the hallway entirely. And I think that's the actual replayability magic of these games. You're not rewarding luck, you're rewarding mastery of the space. And honestly, my dungeons got so much better when I started thinking of them this way. You're not just slapping a map on the table and saying, where you going? You know, you're giving them an option. They need to write notes down like, this is a shortcut, this is what I need, this is what it looks like, this area has enemies in it. It makes the dungeon feel a lot bigger than it actually is. I think this is probably going to be my favorite section because standard D&D zombies, like I said before, are pretty boring. They exist to waste your action economy for 2 rounds. It doesn't do anything. Resident Evil monsters are all built around forcing you to change your behavior, so let's fix that. The Crimson Head problem. You're going to know what I mean if you've played the Resident Evil remake. Kill a zombie, don't burn the body, and it comes back later as a Crimson Head. It's faster, stronger, genuinely terrifying, and usually shows up exactly when you're least prepared for it. Translating this to D&D is almost embarrassingly easy. When a ghoul or zombie dies, tell your players the corpse starts twitching, boiling almost. If nobody spends a torch or oil or a spell or cantrip to burn it, that thing's gonna rise again in 1d4 hours as a much nastier version, double the speed, multi-attack, a leaping strike. It's pretty genius because it makes your players do resource math in real time, especially if no one knows Firebolt as a cantrip or similar, you know? And then we have the Licker, which in my opinion is one of the best designed horror enemies ever put in a video game. And it translates to D&D almost note for note. It's completely blind, exposed brain tissue, doesn't have eyes at all, but it has phenomenal hearing. Mechanically, 50-foot speed, spider climb so it can hang and stalk you from the ceilings, a standing leap so it can close massive distances without warning, blind sight out of 60 feet powered entirely by hearing, and a 10-foot tongue attack that grapples and restrains anything medium or smaller and starts dragging them into the dark. CR 4 or 5 feels about right depending on your party size. The most important part is the execution though. Don't just slap the stat block down and roll initiative. Drop your players into a pitch black glass strewn library, describe the wet slap of something moving upside down on the ceiling. Because it's blind, it hears everything, which turns this into an instant stealth puzzle. Someone fails a stealth check and steps on broken glass, the head snaps towards them. Now your players are throwing objects to misdirect it, holding their breath, deciding whether a loud gunfight is worth the risk. Who knows how many more there are. Big, rubbery grey humanoid. That's right, I'm talking about the Regenerator. Wet, raspy breathing, absolute nightmare fuel, and mechanically, it's basically already a D&D troll. Regenerates every turn unless hit with fire or acid. Sound familiar, right? So steal the troll stat block wholesale and just reflavor the weakness. In my games, its regeneration only stops if you land precision hits on the parasitic core hidden inside of its body. Basically, the players will have to say, I want to try and attack the parasite, which will be a higher DC to hit than any other part of its body would be. That is, of course, once they've realized that that is its weak point. Another one I absolutely love is the Blowfly Witches. Lady Dimitrescu's daughters, if you've played Resident Evil Village, swarms of imitation blowflies wearing a humanoid shape, fully immune to physical damage, swords, arrows, all of it passes right through. Their one weakness? Cold. The extreme cold forces the flies into hibernation, like a calcified state where they can finally be hurt. In D&D, this becomes a genuinely fun puzzle boss instead of a slog. Imagine a coven of insect vampires that your martial characters simply can't touch. The solution isn't like hit it harder, it's shatter the giant stained glass window and let winter blizzard flood the room, or for a caster to use an ice spell. And again, the game does this later on with some interesting puzzles, like you need to turn a crank to get the window to open up and on a timer and then it goes away. You can do similar things in your game with these bosses. Decide what their boss arena is going to be like and then create something unique about it to help with the weaknesses or their strengths. Alright, we need to talk about the single best horror game design trick of the last 20 years, the Stalker, Mr. X Nemesis, or the girl from the new one, Requiem. The entire point of these is to break your cognitive map. You clear a room, you're relaxed. That's just how the game trains you to think. And then an unkillable thing shows up and makes that safe room feel like the most dangerous place in the building again. In Requiem, there's a stalker that crawls through the wall cracks and vents, immune to basically everything while she's in darkness. In my campaign, I built almost exact this for a ruined cathedral sequence, immune to physical damage and low tier magic in the dark, but a cleric's daylight spell creates a genuine safe bubble that she can't cross, and a rogue smashing open a boarded window to let sunlight flood a hallway becomes an actual tactical maneuver instead of set dressing. This forces your players to engage with the environment instead of just rolling attack after attack until a number hits 0, which frankly is most D&D combat, and it's nice to break that pattern for once with one big set piece. If you want the classic lumbering brute instead, give them an absurd amount of HP and legendary resistances, so he can't just get luckily crit killed in one round, but make him slow, then tell your players straight up out of character this thing is drawn to noise. Every time they get loud, a big spell, a shouted argument, a door kicked down, roll a d4 behind your screen. That's how many rounds until he shows up. Suddenly your players are having actual agonized whispered arguments at the table about whether looting the last chest is worth the risk of summoning their own personal Terminator. But please don't let your stalker follow the party literally everywhere. It just gets annoying and really quickly, trust me. Try keep it contained to a specific area, a specific act of the dungeon, so your interconnecting loops and shortcuts actually matter as an escape valve. Let your players outsmart it. That's more satisfying than any amount of chasing. There's plenty of versions of this out there, but for this we're going to use a system that's built into Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft, and it's called the stress score, and it's fantastic for this exact use case. Every character starts at 0 stress. It ticks up when something genuinely awful happens, an ally drops to 0 HP in front of you, or you get ambushed in total darkness, you watch a corpse mutate into a crimson head right in front of your face. And the mechanical hook is beautifully simple. Your current stress score gets subtracted directly from all your attack rolls, ability checks and saving throws. It's simple and elegant. A fighter with 4 stress starts messing up swings they would normally land in their sleep, or a rogue with 3 stress fumbles a lockpick they've done 100 times. It's the mechanical language for I am too scared to think straight, and it bridges the gap between HP and psychological horror in a way nothing else really does in 5e. And the relief valve matters just as much. Stress goes down when you're in a safe room, when you take time to actually roleplay supporting your party instead of just plowing forwards, or when someone burns a precious spell slot. Calm emotions suppresses it temporarily, lesser restoration removes a point permanently, which by the way suddenly makes those spells way more interesting choices than they usually are. My closing thought on all of this is that if every single session is you have no resources and everything can kill you, it just makes the game exhausting. This is honestly the smartest thing about Requiem's whole structure. Splitting the game between 2 protagonists. Grace is an untrained FBI analyst who's playing pure first-person survival horror, hiding under tables and rationing everything, evading things she can't fight. And then Leon, a grizzled veteran with an expanded inventory, a hatchet he can parry with, and the tools to straight up mow down a crowd. Brings out 2 totally different versions of the same game, which is something you can build and extract into your campaign's leveling curve. Basically level 1 to 3 is the Grace era, start with nothing, no gold, minimal gear. Again, there's actual survivor tier rules in Van Richten's Guide built for exactly this if you want a shortcut. Lean hard into the active inventory system, the stress mechanic, and the running and hiding gameplay. This isn't just about making your players feel powerless, but it's also showing how far they will come, you know? Something that they might hide and escape from will actually be something that they take down with ease later on when they level up. Level 5 and beyond is the Leon era. After they crack the dungeon central puzzle, let them find a cache of real magic gear, or just let their class features naturally kick in, multi-attack, 3rd level spells, fireball, etc. Now they get to walk back through the halls that terrorize them and absolutely wreck the place. Let them have that. It's earned and cathartic, and it's the payoff for every torch they rationed and every corpse they burned. And it's really that oscillation between powerless and powerful, then thrown into a new nightmare and powerless again. It's genuinely the secret to why this franchise has lasted 30 years, and it maps onto D&D leveling curve perfectly for me, without much extra thought or input. So kids, that's the blueprint. Reshape the lore instead of copy and pasting it, strip out the safety nets, the free food, the full heal naps, and replace them with bulk, usage dice, and safe rooms your players have to actually earn. Build your dungeons like Metroidvania, not a hallway. Give your monsters a gimmick, not just a stat block. Let someone unkillable hunt them through a wing of the map, and make fear itself subtract from their dice. And above all else, let them have their action hero moment eventually. Don't just grind them into paste for 12 sessions straight. And for anyone wondering, did my table survive the one shot I ran to do this video? video? No, they didn't. The Crimson Head got the Rogue. She's still pretty mad about it. If you actually run any of this, the bulk system, the liquor, the stress score, any of it, I genuinely want to know how it goes. Drop it in the comments if you want, or if you've run something similar to this, let us know how it went, what you did, if you did anything different to me, and if you want me to make this into something like an adventure with stat blocks and monsters, let me know in the comments. If enough people say yes, then maybe I'll do it. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay spicy, adventurers.